Daniel Craig's James Bond romanced a handful of Bond girls in his 5007 movies, but the most underrated is Dr. Madeleine Swann, Léa Seydoux. Craig rebooted 007 in 2006 Casino Royale and became the longest-tenured James Bond actor with his final film, 2021's No Time to Die. As James Bond, Craig took the 007 franchise to new heights of box office success and popularity, with 2012 Skyfall grossing over $1 billion worldwide. Part of Daniel Craig's reinvention of James Bond was changing Bond girls for the 21st century. Bond girls have traditionally been sex objects and eye candy. While often partnering with 007 on his adventures, Bond girls were also portrayed as sexual playthings for James, who moved on to the next one in each movie. Just as Craig's James Bond movies plumbed his emotional depths and vulnerabilities, his Bond girls were given more agency and heavily factored into James' growth as a character. But Craig's final Bond girl is ultimately his most important, even if she is overshadowed by his first. Why Dr. Madeleine Swann is Daniel Craig's most underrated Bond girl. There's no Bond girl quite like Madeleine Swann. Dr. Madeleine Swann is the most pivotal yet underrated Bond girl of Daniel Craig's James Bond movies. Introduced in 2015 Spectre, Madeleine was a psychiatrist in a private clinic in the Austrian Alps. Unlike most Bond girls, Dr. Swann had an intriguing backstory. Madeleine was the daughter of 007's nemesis and Spectre agent, Mr. White, Jesper Christensen. No Time to Die revealed that the young Madeleine survived an assassination attempt by Liatsefer Safin, Ram Malek, another of White and Spectre's enemies. Madeleine rejected the life of thieves and assassins she was born into, but she was also a tough and capable match for James Bond. Naturally, Bond and Madeleine fell in love, and Dr. Swann is the only character in James Bond history to have a child with him, a daughter named Mathilde, Lysadora Sonnet. Madeleine was an ideal foil for Daniel Craig's Bond, and the fact that she was the main Bond girl in 2007 films proves her impact. Yet Madeleine isn't hailed as Craig's best Bond girl and isn't as fondly remembered as his original, Vesper Lynd, Eva Green. Why Vesper Lynd is Daniel Craig's most popular Bond girl? Vesper's memory still haunts Bond in No Time to Die. Vesper Lynd seems destined to remain the definitive Bond girl of Daniel Craig's James Bond era. Introduced in Casino Royale, Vesper was a Treasury liaison sent to oversee the funds Her Majesty's government granted 007 for his high-stakes poker game operation against Le Chiffre, Mads Mikkelsen. Vesper was the first woman Craig's Bond ever truly loved, and he was devastated when Vesper lied to and betrayed Bond because she was being blackmailed by Quantum. Bond was unable to save Vesper, who died in Venice, and this turned 007 into a cold-blooded assassin. Eva Green ignited the screen opposite Daniel Craig in Casino Royale, and it's certainly understandable why Vesper is seared into audiences' minds, as well as 007's heart, as Craig's ultimate Bond girl. Vesper was a tragic figure who still haunted Bond in No Time to Die, with James trying to put her memory to rest at Madeleine Swann's request. Vesper was also far more emotionally complex than previous Bond girls. The fact that James Bond couldn't save Vesper makes her a fundamental aspect of Craig's version of 007, and it's safe to say audiences loved Vesper just like Bond did. M was the true Bond girl of Skyfall. Daniel Craig's Bond loved M. Skyfall was the zenith of Daniel Craig's James Bond as a box office blockbuster, and it was the swan song of Judi Dench's tenure as M. While Skyfall had a traditional Bond girl in Severine, Berenice Marlohe, and introduced Naomi Harris as the rebooted version of Eve Moneypenny, it was Dench's M who was Skyfall's true Bond girl. James spent the latter half of Skyfall protecting M from Raoul Silva, Javier Bardem, a cyber-terrorist who once worked for M. Ultimately, Bond couldn't save M, and it was the tragic end of their relationship where M was as much an ersatz mother figure to James as she was his supervisor. Judi Dench crossed James Bond timelines to return as M in Casino Royale. Dench became M in 1995's GoldenEye and played the head of MI6 in all four of Pierce Brosnan's James Bond movies. However, M took a harsher stance on Brosnan's 007, initially referring to him as a sexist, misogynist dinosaur. In turn, M was labeled the evil queen of numbers. Daniel Craig's James Bond movies reinvented M to be much closer to and more supportive of 007 while still maintaining professional distance and objectivity. M's death was a loss for James Bond that almost equaled his heartbreak over Vesper Lynd. Ana de Armas Palomar stole No Time to Die from Madeleine Swann. Everyone fell in love with Palomar. No Time to Die brought back Madeleine Swann as the mother of James Bond's daughter and introduced Nomi, Lashana Lynch, as the new MI6 agent with a license to kill designated 007, but it was Palomar, Ana de Armas, who stole No Time to Die from every other woman in the film. Introduced as a CIA agent fresh from 5 weeks of training, Palomar helped Bond crash and fight their way through a Spectre party in Cuba. Ana de Armas was an effervescent delight as Palomar, and she was equal parts sexy and deadly, taking out Spectre agents alongside Bond. It was actually rather disappointing that Palomar only had that small part to play in No Time to Die. Ana de Armas was so popular in No Time to Die, audiences clamored for a Palomar spin-off. Instead, Ana de Armas plied her skills as a secret agent as new characters in 2022's The Grey Man, directed by Joe and Anthony Russo, and the upcoming spin-off from the world of John Wick, Ballerina, directed by Len Wiseman. Palomar was such a giddy and unforgettable presence in No Time to Die, it's understandable that she overshadowed Madeleine Swann and her more serious role in Daniel Craig's final Bond film. Still, the underrated Dr. Madeleine Swann not only became the mother to James Bond's child, but No Time to Die thankfully spared her the tragic death that Tracy Bond, Diana Rigg, suffered in On Her Majesty's Secret Service.